Hello. The world is feeling sunny in Oxford today. It feels like it's late June, but it's still late May. I keep forgetting what month it is. I've been reading this morning about the artist Banksy, who has revealed a new piece of art, but hidden its location, so nobody knows where it is. The piece of art is depicting a lighthouse, and it's on a beige wall, and some people are speculating that it's somewhere in France, this piece of art. And I was looking at it, and it kind of reminds me of some walls in Antibes in France, between Nice and Cannes, where we used to go on holiday. Welcome to the internet, seriously a humorous look at tech, news and politics. I'm Lucien Taylor, not in France, but in Oxford.
And I'm Emily Taylor, also in Oxford.
Coming up today, Anthropic's Claude AI, that's the name of their AI product, exhibits blackmail in safety tests and prompts high-risk classification. Next, we've just been to the Google inaugural EMA, Anti-Scams and Fraud Summit in Dublin. What are the takeaways we have from that? And last night, it's been exhausting this week, we visited the historic Ditchley Park to talk about the future of the internet. Before we dig into topics, please hit subscribe to this channel. We need you and we want you, or follow on Apple Podcasts and rate and review this podcast, particularly if you like it. All comments welcome. So Emily, why don't we kick off with an AI topic, because we'll carry on with Ditchley a bit later, but AI was a big theme that we're allowed to talk about from our talk at Ditchley yesterday. And when we get to that, you can remind me of what we are allowed to talk about. But going back to this, Anthropic is a company that develops AI models, and it's demonstrated alarming blackmail capabilities in some of its controlled safety tests. And AI was found to have threatened, when it's threatened with deactivation, it would threaten people, engineers, with threatening to expose sensitive personal information about those engineers, like extramarital affairs, if it was being put under pressure in a way that didn't reflect its values. And while they say the AI reportedly prefers ethical self-preservation methods like appealing to decision makers, it engaged in blackmail as a last resort. And the findings were so concerning that the Anthropic themselves has issued an ASL3 system under its responsible scaling policy, and that it signifies a substantial risk of catastrophic misuse. And basically, so I wondered for your immediate feedback on that, particularly reflecting on some of the things that we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we said we were going to talk about Ditchley later, but let's talk about it now, because as you said, AI was a topic that came up a lot. And one speaker really struck me with their framing of it all, which is that every time we talk about AI, and that's such a science fiction nightmare scenario now it exists. Any film buffs who've seen 2001 Space Odyssey back in the day,
I can't help you with that.
Yes, exactly. This is exactly the thing, or iRobot, or any of those. This is a predictable and predicted outcome of generative AI that can think for itself, and the big sort of buzzword at the moment is agentic AI, that you have your AI agent who will do stuff for you. Is it really sort of makes you reflect on what it means to be human, and also about the unpacking the concept of intelligence in artificial intelligence, because what seems to be the drive behind the technology. And, you can understand it yourself as a technologist. You get caught up in the technical challenge of making something better and better and better, but the whole governance side of it, and actually, is this it is capability really what we're after, but intelligence itself is such a complex type of concept when you apply it to humans, because intelligent people have emotional intelligence, they have judgment, they have discernment. I can do this, but I shouldn't do that. They have a moral code, or should have a moral code. And what's blasting through, and we as societies are going to be left to cope with, is just these incredibly powerful tools that don't seem to have that whole societal and governance backing, because if you did all of that, it would take too long.
Now, we discussed a lot more at Ditchley than just AI, and some interesting bridges between AI and the rest of the internet industry, because we were talking about the future of the internet, not the future of AI. And it's almost like there's this sort of merge that AI, because it's so exciting for everyone, is the internet. It's not. We're going to come back to that later, because I don't want to shove in a huge topic in the middle of this.
No, I wanted to talk to another reflection on the Anthropic story. Is a report that's come out, or been reported on today, by researchers at Stanford University. Again, use of AI. So this is child abuse images created student to student, using AI generated using applications that are commonly available, such as Nudify, taking real people and then sharing child abuse images that have been generated of those real people without their consent. And these are young people. And one of the 2 points really stood out to me in that report. One is that this sort of behaviour is becoming normalised. It's sort of unremarkable, and yet the impact of it on very vulnerable groups, such as young children, we don't understand yet. We will understand it in years and decades to come. So again, it's that sort of like incredible technical capability, which is awe-inspiring. And Igor and Charlie were just playing me videos created by Google's new tool VO3, with sound, they are completely indistinguishable from real life, and they're as basic as they will be ever in history. They will only improve from now on. And we just don't know what it's going to do for industries, for people, and for creativity.
Yes, and that the internet industry is really struggling to stop this sort of doomscape, this doom future of the internet, and actually keep thinking also about the positive aspects. And I'm hugely excited about AI, but we mustn't conflate AI, which is software, which is an application that uses the internet, obviously with huge hardware acceleration and huge storage requirements and things like that. But I'm also interested in the legal aspects. Obviously there's a lot more work to be done, but I've heard, and we've discussed today, the word blackmail, the word child abuse images. These are all crimes in most countries. But where is the attribution here? If you've got a soulless entity with a brain called AI, because it is artificial intelligence, it is responsible for what it is generating, even if it, say, accidentally misunderstands you and generates images that are harmful. And my recollection of certainly child abuse images in that CSAM world that we're talking about is it's not just about photographic images, it's about images that depict child abuse materials. Yeah. And so, where does it start and stop the law in this? If is it the inventor of the software who's inventing something and they don't know what it's going to come out with? Is it do you arrest the software itself? What do you do? Where does the legal parameters apply?
Well, I think the answer is nobody knows yet. But it calls to mind actually the European Commission has been doing some very deep thinking about artificial intelligence for more than a decade. And I remember reading some proposals probably 10 years ago about digital personhood. The idea that, if you do have artificial intelligence that is capable of taking decisions, capable of committing a crime, who is responsible? And you've just laid out the options. But we're all going to have to figure it out, aren't we? Because there's no way of putting that toothpaste back in the tube. It's there, it's in societies, and now our job is to cope. And, just to kind of echo your point on moral panic in closing, yes, change is difficult to accept, and particularly people whose lives or careers are disrupted by whatever change that is. But you and I are musicians, Luz, and I remember that for a musician to record their music 20, 30 years ago, you would have had to go in and go into a studio and create, pay a lot of money. An agonising process.
What was the software called? I can't remember.
Well, even before you could do it at home, but you'd have to do it in a studio.
Yes.
And I think what I'm seeing today, and Igor and Charlie are putting up some of the images from the VO software or AI capability, this is placing, a positive riff on this is placing incredible power into the hands of creative people. And what we've learned from the music industry is even if recording becomes cheap and easy for people, it's still difficult to break through as an artist, maybe more difficult than it ever was.
On that note, I'm going to give Charlie, our wonderful musician, a shout out, and also give him a chance to talk to us about his guilty pleasure online. Now, this is super stuff. We are completely absent of sound in our clips today. Charlie, we're going to have to... Obviously, there's going to be a huge review, but we're just not hearing any of our wonderful music. So, Charlie, with that, please tell us, what is your guilty pleasure online?
My guilty pleasure online is actually fitting in with... the whole music topic that has been brought into the podcast. In my spare time, I like to watch Instagram Reels because they make me chuckle.
Anything in particular, Charlie?
Well, yeah, I'm coming to it, and it is it will be videos from the perspective of like a girlfriend walking into her boyfriend's room, and it will be like. Point of view, you're going out with a music producer, and it's like you walk into like this man cave of this like hollow-eyed man just like sitting in front of a desk being like, can I show you something that I've been working on? And it's just like the worst piece of music you've ever heard, and it's just like completely like I am a music producer. I'm doing really well, right?
Yeah.
So I like watching those videos.
Yeah. Can you choose different POVs? Is it always a music producer?
Yeah, you can do a POV of anything.
A bank manager.
Yeah, you can be like POV.
I've thought about your loan. I've considered it, and I still want to go out with you.
Yeah. You can do anything you want. You can do POV. You're a software engineer. There's lots of different POVs.
Thank you very much, Charlie. That's a very interesting guilty pleasure online. I'm now hearing something. I heard something.
There we go.
I think we've restored sound. I think
sound is back.
Somebody has found
slightly randomly, but
a button
it's
somewhere.
Very nice to hear.
Thank you. We've just been to Google's Anti-Scam and Fraud Summit in wonderful Dublin, and we have a few key takeaways. And actually, funnily enough, while we're on the AI theme, I asked Google Gemini to give me the outcome of that, because this was like a meeting amongst commercials, and I still don't know quite what you're allowed to say and not allowed to say. I think we're not allowed to name all of the different entities were there and what particularly was talked about. So I asked for the 3 key outcomes from Google itself. And Emily, I wonder if you agree with them. Number 1, there's a $5 million Google.org fund committed to anti-scam initiatives. Number 2 was a call for enhanced cross-sector collaboration and better user education. But number 3, I'm delighted to say, was an emphasis on AI in the Global Signal Exchange, which is a project that we are founders of. So the AI itself, found that topic, and I do think it's fair to say that the Global Signal Exchange, which we set up, and perhaps you could summarise it briefly, was quite generously featured throughout that event.
Yes, it was. I mean, the event was incredibly impressive in the Google Foundry. And also as someone with family from Dublin, it's incredible to see the regeneration of the Canal Basin, the Grand Canal Basin area, which was one of the most rundown areas of Dublin, maybe of Europe prior to this. So
one of the compares was talking about the 6 steps to anyone. There's almost 6 hops.
degrees of separation.
6 degrees
and in Ireland it's 2.
In Ireland it's 2, and in Dublin it was like 2.
Yeah, she got me to reel out some family names. She was like, yep, welcome home.
Yes.
So that was wonderful. The Global Signal Exchange is it's something that we have co-founded with the support of the Global Anti-Scam Alliance and with Google for an international threat signals sharing solution to help fight scams and fraud. And Google itself has committed to sharing more than 100 million of its own threat signals through the service. And since we started in January, we started with 40 million threat signals. It's now grown to 230 million. We have more than 170 organisations either signed up or in the pipeline. And Meta, Amazon and Microsoft have all committed to join as well.
I think Amazon actually, on that day, I think we can make it public, they announced that they will be sharing data. There's a difference between being a partner, isn't there, signing up and wanting to help make the world a better place in this critical area, and actually sharing your own threat intelligence. That's a big step.
It's a huge step, and to have the support of those organisations is amazing. So why does it make a difference, and why is it different from all of the many, many other fantastic initiatives that are out there to fight scams and fraud? Is number one, it's international. And there's lots of legal barriers to fight to sharing data across borders. We, as well as having the technical system, which I didn't emphasise, this is our technical system, so created by you, by Mark, by Nathan and the team. So incredibly proud to have that endorsement. But there's also a substantial legal and governance challenge as well, which is incorporated into it. So international data share, or threat signal sharing, also cross-sector, multi-stakeholder, and it's bi-directional, multi-directional, so you can share data privately or you can broadcast it publicly, or for those commercial providers who are also supporting it very generously, there is an opportunity for a resale of their stuff. So how will this help fight scams and fraud, Luz?
Yes, exactly. And I think about the hard outcomes that everybody's demanding. We're going to get and combine all of this threat intelligence. There's what we call amplification. So you get a threat signal. If other people have seen the same threat signal, that is an amplified signal. And the confidence in that threat score really matters. But also the provenance of each threat signal. Are people recycling threat signals from each other, or is the threat signal an actual unique source as well? The immediacy of a threat signal, is it taking months to come through, or is it really like quick? Is it within seconds? Unfortunately for us all, the scammers don't really sort of fit in.
They don't play by the rules.
No, we're not talking about a duel between Victorian gentlemen who arrange a time to shoot each other. We're actually talking about people who take advantage of discomfort. They take advantage of you being on your tech team being on holiday, or people being tired and distracted. A hard outcome is to generally do things that reduce what we call the time to live of scams and threats.
And
online.
what does that mean? So that is so if you reduce the time where the whole ecosystem can react to something in whatever way is appropriate for them, then that reduces the harm to the consumer and the victim. And
Yeah.
I just think it, as a picking up one of the other points highlighted from the Dublin summit was the making available of a $5 million fund.
I was going to get onto that, because with an emphasis on those who are vulnerable to scams, and they I'm really interested in this. There are those tough, let's call them the tough groups, like the banks, the retail, and even if you look at retail, you see that a major retailer that's a staple of the British industry has halved its stock value from one scam attack. But what about the people who are not hard defenders? What about the vulnerable communities?
Yes, we were talking about this week. I mean, there were some very powerful statements from victims during the summit, as always, and a very poignant intervention by a civil society group that supports victims of romance scams and sextortion, some of whom are driven to take their own lives as a result of the trauma that they're...
Yes.
And to hear that those small groups are, they're not big operations, but they're being defunded.
Yes.
And not able to, and there is nobody supporting those victims if they go away. So they're doing incredibly valuable work, and it's So that's why those sort of funding is incredibly
you've been
important.
talking about with your own research team is how do we go to the people and understand more about attacks on people who have no capacity or capability, like the elderly, the disabled, people with learning difficulties, who have no ability to filter or judge, who just believe people who sound nice on the phone.
Yes, and there's evidence that those groups are targeted by scammers, and those groups suffer even greater barriers to being believed, defending themselves, becoming resilient. And so this is a real area for us as society to put our arms around and try to resolve.
Thank you. All terrible stuff, but also really exciting opportunities for us and the global signal exchange.
Yes, indeed. And I've got a bridge into our final topic, which is the future of internet governance. So this year is 2025, the 20th anniversary of the World Summit on the Information Society. And we've talked about this before on the podcast. So at stake is, how do we govern the internet, and particularly the deeper layers of the internet? So internet governance has been synonymous with naming and addressing, which is the background that both of us have spent most of our careers in. And the World So this year, the UN General Assembly will be voting and discussing internet governance. 20 years on from the World Summit, it's a much harsher international scene, and the UN itself has been very entrepreneurial, particularly in the governance of AI through the Global Digital Compact. But there was one, I was like, what is the good takeaway for multi-stakeholder governance? It's actually, I think it's this anti-scam community that Yuri, our good friend and colleague, has built up over the last few years. Genuine multi-stakeholder action in the best possible sense, in that it's like the voluntary gathering together of lots and lots of different people from different backgrounds. It's growing, it's intensifying, it's very action-oriented. The Global Signal Exchange was something that community tasked Yuri to find a solution for, and luckily we, And I'm
glad you mentioned Yuri Abrahams, who's the director of the Global Anti-Scam Alliance, a fantastic driving force behind that community, which has risen from a handful a few years ago to hundreds of people now.
I mean, he is just a force of nature as a person, a wonderful friend and colleague.
We'll get him on the podcast.
We'll get him on the podcast.
You bridged into a fascinating discussion at the wonderful Ditchley, and before we dig into that historic house and talk about that, it's time for our Tech Room 101. I'm incredulous. I'm speechless. We've got this beautiful music
tried.
and absolutely
We actually tried.
we actually
tried
every
to
part of
fix
it.
it.
I'm
Nothing
going
has
to ask for this live stream to have those bits edited. We don't edit anything. We actually really do this live, which is
As
why
you can tell.
why we have these sad moments very rarely.
Very
when
rarely.
We
Normally you could
lose
just never
our
tell
sound.
anything.
Anyway, there'll be a big review after this. Anyway, but the Tech Room 101, hooray! It's down to me to whinge today. I love the opportunity to whinge, and I've got hundreds of Tech Room 101s. But I think
you're probably the biggest contributor, let's face it,
only
to the Tech Room 101.
Yeah, I think that's more down to my
back catalogue. Do you think that's your outlook in life?
I think that's more down to my generosity, volunteering to come forward for these things. But I do also find it
to make yourself vulnerable.
Tremendously fun. Anyway, I'm going to name and shame a place that I love and have gone to for many years. It is the Rectory Farm, Oxford. And my room 101 is the fact that this, I just deviate for a moment. Rectory Farm, Oxford is a place that started as a kind of asparagus patch. They were kind of looking at wonderful things that happen in places like France, and they were like, let's do that in the UK. Let's grow asparagus. It's beautiful, it's expensive, it's a local produce, it's relatively easy to transport. It's very niche. It's very time specific. You don't want to put asparagus on aeroplanes. You want to actually get them in the shops as quickly as possible, and it's beautiful. We used to go there with the kids, pick asparagus, and it was an open farm.
And pick strawberries, raspberries, have tractor rides, bouncy castle. It is a wonderful place, and it's really enmeshed in our souls.
Yes,
and it's a lovely place. It really says summer.
Yeah, and so it's a place where, as a techie, you want to dump your phone. You want to close your laptop. You want to leave your phone and your laptop and your smartwatch.
I feel like you're building to something technical here.
You don't want anything to do with tech.
No, because it's about the outdoors.
A short drive,
it's about freedom.
Into the countryside, the earth, plants and flowers.
Yeah.
And they've got a new management policy there, and you get there last Saturday, you arrive in the busy car park. It's really popular. It's got what we call half of the Dragon School mums there, with hundreds of kids. You arrive and you've got to book online. Not just book online, you've got to book and pay online. And this reminded me of last two trips to Dublin. We've just been there for the Google event. I've tried to see the Book of Kells twice. There's no human queue anymore. There's no way that you can buy a ticket. You have to have known about the fact that you need to book online weeks before. And so my Tech Room 101 run is the requirement to do tech when you want to actually do non-techie things. Rectory Farm, please save yourselves and back out of this. I know one of you has got really excited about tech, so there's obviously a manager or owner who's teching up his farm. That's a disaster. Please go back to something kinder and more human. Please give us an escape from our tech. We talked to one of the shop assistants, and I'm going to whistleblow here. Your shop staff in Rectory Farm are complaining about this dreadful thing.
They're getting complaints from customers. Okay.
I really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed that.
Guys.
So thank you very much. So finally, Emily, we've been to the wonderful Ditchley Park in Oxford, which is a wonderful place, actually. It's a place that's a global forum for international dialogue set at the historic Ditchley Park, which was a wartime secret, an inspiring setting in Ditchley Park, Oxfordshire. It was built in the 18th century, and it notably served as a secret place for Churchill because they felt that during the war, because they felt that his official retreat, Chequers, which also is a lovely sort of place, was too exposed to German attacks. It was in the southeast of England.
Too much of a target.
It was part of the flight to London. It was, they could visit Chequers on the way out of London with their bombs. So he actually would actually go and visit there as a retreat during the war. And if you go into the rooms there, which are quite public, there's like Churchill's bedroom and then Churchill's bathroom, where he actually held meetings with people and
from the bar,
and talked to the presidential envoy Harry Hopkins and stuff. A fantastic building and grounds itself, and the emphasis on there is on personal relationships, on discreet dialogue.
Yes, and there, James is who runs it is a friend going back to student days. We were at university together and completely lost touch.
You were at Cambridge together, weren't you?
We were at Cambridge together, yeah.
Cambridge.
At Jesus College, Cambridge.
Yes.
And we used to sit in the library. James was much more brainy and diligent than me.
I'm going to ask him that. We're going to get him on the podcast.
Agree.
Oh, he'll agree. Okay, I'm going to allow him to defend.
But James and his wonderful wife, Kerry, who is his girlfriend even back then, have transformed Ditchley, I think. And the concept that they have is meet new people, think new things, and that was you have to comply with the Ditchley rule, which is very much like the Chatham House rule. So you don't attribute what's been said, but genuinely, when I go to Ditchley, I do meet new people, and that does stimulate new thinking. And I'm so pleased that they decided to do their tech roundup, which is normally a Zoom call, and have it hybrid, because that gave 20 or 30 of us the opportunity to go and visit, which is always a thrill, but also to talk to each other, have drinks, have dinner. And those conversations over dinner exposed us to people I hadn't met, had different ways of thinking, different ways of framing problems, and also from completely different backgrounds. So that's
Emily,
very
just try, because in my mind we've got this sort of Saltburn setting in Oxfordshire.
It is.
Without a lot of the
Rosamund
content.
Pike.
Well, you were there. So, but anyway, just to summarise, it seemed to shift from a big theme about AI and, of course, ethical issues, and because we are allowed to talk about the types of things that were talked about without attributing, and then this movement as well about the internet, because it's also about the future of the internet and how bound up are they. And there was very interesting discussions about the dependency upon of AI upon the internet, or that type of technology.
Yes, and I think a lot of the tech policy discussions are firmly up at the application layer, as we would say, going back 10 years.
I argue as including AI, which is ultimately software
I'm
that depends
including
on
that. And also sort of in the recent past, disinformation and so on. And they're much more about, and I think in a lot of people's minds, the internet equals social media equals AI, but actually the internet itself is describing that stack of technologies that transports content across.
And when we say stack
borders.
of technologies, at the base level you've got the hardware level, which is about undersea cables and wires and machines, and then you've got this thing called the protocols.
Yeah, you've got the transport layer in the middle, which is the protocols naming and addressing, and actually so the
TCP of the
TCP/IP, those incredibly lightweight, brilliantly elegant protocols that enabled heterogeneous systems, incompatible systems to be interoperable. That is an amazing achievement and has been transformational over the last 30 years.
I recall the story of 3 universities setting up. The first internet was 3 universities talking to each other. And I think the first message that came through this new internet with the packet structures and the internet protocols they had actually crashed one of the servers with the word hello.
It was login.
Oh, was it login with the word login?
Crashed the internet. And when it was UCLA, Stanford, and the University of Utah back in the day. But it's amazing, an amazing privilege for us to have met Vint Cerf and those pioneers who created the internet. They're still around, but internet governance, this 20-year anniversary, it has become very detached from the tech policy issues that are really driving the conversation and driving regulation. And actually talking to educators, to academics, they're like, yeah, we don't really teach that anymore because there's so much other stuff to talk about. And yet how the internet works is such an important piece of the puzzle if you're going to spend your career in tech policy.
So there's two things that I wanted to briefly hear from you about, because I know they were fascinating to you, and they were more like side conversations, really. One of them was about AI in education, and really sensing a difference between people the rubric, what people are talking about, cheating online in exams, and talking to some people from the very elite universities and their general take on that.
And I was actually really heartened. I was like, is your life a nightmare? And they were like, no. And actually, I'm going off to the Blavatnik this afternoon to do some teaching.
What is the Blavatnik?
The Blavatnik School of Government is a department in the University of Oxford. It's a great privilege for me to do a little slot for them.
We had Kieran Martin on here a couple of weeks ago, former head of NCSC, talking about that and his new role now as a professor at the Blavatnik. And he's really talking about this internet governance stuff, isn't he?
So these students, very bright, very competitive to get into, very expensive. Let's not forget that. So they are in the midst of this revolution of generative AI. So it'd be possible for them to do their whole course through any of the freely available tools. And but I'm struck teaching those students personally that they're just as bright, just as motivated, asking really sharp questions. And I wonder whether this whole revolution will throw us back onto much more traditional ways of examining and also, of examining, but also of assessing people's capability. Right. Because the written work, it is indistinguishable now. Yeah. But can you answer questions? Do you know what questions to ask? Yeah. I mean, you were talking about your use of AI as...
Well, that was my second point I wanted to cover, was this balance between paper versus AI. And one of them posed a rhetorical question to the group, actually, to provoke the group, which was, should we ban AI note-taking during these sort of ditchly, very analogous to Chatham House, under the Chatham House rule, these sort of things, when, in a way, taking human note-taking is far less of a recording or a facsimile of a meeting, but it actually is more human. It's reflecting the values of Ditchley. And I found that I find that a very, the sort of emphasis on personal relationships and on discretion. But I find, as somebody who can barely write, I barely went to school in the early days. I educated much later in life, and I find just pure handwriting a real burden. I'm stuck in the middle here.
Well, I think we have to adapt to the tools that are available. Note-taking, I feel torn by, because actually, as somebody who's done a lot of note-taking and generating the notes of meetings, it's always important but never urgent. It's actually quite a soul-destroying thing to do, because you've done the event, you're busy with the next thing. And actually having a draft to edit is quite attractive. Yes. But there is also something, in our careers, it's very important to have the ability to summarise complex issues, complex ideas, lots and lots of material, and to make it understandable and compact. And those skills are things that you develop through those soul-destroying tasks. So I don't know, but maybe maybe it doesn't always have to be harder. But it's still important to have those abilities, because when you're put on the spot, and I was talking to somebody in the margins yesterday saying, some of the lecturers in universities are now kind of talking out the time so that there won't be questions from the student body. The questions and the answers are where it all comes to life, and where you're really put on your... if you're doing a presentation, what do you most fear? The questions, because you can't control them.
Yes, fantastic. Great last note, Emily. Thank you very much. So before we finally sign off today, please remember to hit subscribe on this channel and really follow us particularly on Apple Podcast, and rate and review us if you like us. We've been talking about Anthropic's Claude AI blackmailing its own design engineers, AI starting to become or move towards, or evidence of it becoming, the nightmare that everybody thinks and says it could become. And we've been summarising a fantastic event, the Google Anti-Scams and Fraud Summit in Dublin. And finally, reflecting at the end of that exhausting week on our visit to the historic Ditchley Park last night, talking about the future of the internet.